Leader.
Yeah, go ahead, Hugh.
1 second. Okay.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to this meeting of Cabinet on Thursday, the 17th of February, 2022. I'll move to apologies for absence first, please.
Thank you, Leader. I have apologies from Councillor David Hopkins.
And I know both Councillor Child and Councillor Stevens may be joining us late, but we'll record their apologies if they're unable to join us before we get to the end of the meeting. We'll move then to the minutes of the previous meeting, pages 1 to 5. I haven't been advised of any changes, but happy to take any if there are any. If not, if I can formally move them, can I have a seconder, please? Thank you very much. All those in favour? Okay, that's carried. Thank you very much.
We need interest, item 2.
Apologies, yes. Declarations of personal prejudicial interest. Are there any to declare today? Councillor King.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Personal interest only in item 18 as a member of the Regional Partnership Board.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Smith.
Personal interest in the I've got dispensation local authority governor appointment.
Okay, great. Are there any other declarations to make today? No, can't see any further hands. Okay, thank you, colleagues. Move then to announcements of Leader of the Council. I have no specific announcements to make this morning, so we'll move to public question time. Are there any members of the public present who would like to ask a question?
Nothing submitted, Leader.
Okay, thank you. Are there any councillors present who are not members of the Cabinet who would like to ask questions?
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I sent some questions in for Councillor Mark Thomas. I'm more than happy to have a written reply if no verbal reply today.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Thomas, are you happy with the written reply?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind giving a little brief update, verbal, but some of it, and particularly question 3, I believe it is, will require a written response, a full and written response, Chair. So, but certainly on question 1, the question is about, the consultation and the issues surrounding the consultation over the active travel routes, and will we be looking to improve on that or change it? And the comment Councillor Hawley's made about the integrated network map being out of date. I just want to come back on that. This is all part of a process that's laid down by Welsh Government. Every authority in Wales has to have a integrated network or active travel network map that they work to and consult on. So we consulted on that throughout Swansea in 2017. That was then subsequently submitted to Welsh Government in 2018 and approved by Welsh Government. So it's not out of date. It's a live document until the next integrated network map is consulted upon and accepted by Welsh Government. So that was carried out in last November 2021. We done an extensive consultation process right across Swansea, and included, because we actually went above and beyond what was required, because an online survey would have been sufficed, or consultation would have been sufficed, but we did, and we were very keen to engage with public and any interested parties. So we actually did face-to-face meetings, albeit in the pandemic, but obviously under the strict controls that were in place at the time. So we carried out that consultation. That's with Welsh Government as we speak, and that will take Welsh Government, they consider the map, and if they accept it, then that becomes our new integrated or active travel network map to take us forward for the next 4 to 5 years. So that's that one. Question 2 then, Councillor Hawley asks about, can we have costs for all the projects? That's the one I was referring to, sorry, would be better in written form, and certainly we can give costs. I mean, I just wanted to ask Councillor Hawley, if he had a specific scheme or project in mind, that would be helpful, because we can zone in on that or those. Otherwise, what might be useful is if I give the total cost, it'll have to be in written form, of all of our active travel projects over the last 2 years. So I can send that in.
I think it would be better if you sent a written reply with the details of each individual.
There's a lot of detail in there, and
I think that's better than to do it today.
Right, okay. And yes, on question 3 was about consultation. We're always looking to improve and enhance the consultation. As I said, we've just carried out a citywide consultation process in November, and we're always looking to engage with members of the public on any scheme and how, if it impacts them, it goes near their houses or properties. Those people immediately affected are always, consulted with and spoken to, and we try to make arrangements, and that's right across the sector. Wherever we can, we will always look to make alterations, improvements that improve how the route affects people and where they live, but without trying to, without not going ahead with the route. So it's trying to find that compromise where we need to build a route, but we will always do it in as sympathetic a manner, and that includes avoiding things like trees and that, because we're desperate not to remove any trees. So we do reroute or slightly alter the courses, and that is something we'll always look and look to improve on and to do as much of it as we possibly can. But I'll give a written response certainly on question 2 and the content there, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. The reality of life is, I know the consultation was done in 2017, but let's be blunt about it. People have slept since then, and the reality is they see these consultations and they forget about them until they actually see something happening on the ground. I think, as you know, and I think all councillors know, the communication is a cornerstone of our lives, telling people what's going on. And I think really, in future, if we learnt anything from this, I think it's a more up-to-date letter drop or whatever, which way we do it would be advisable. But thank you for your answers.
Yeah, can I just finally on that one? And look, our live schemes, the schemes that we got in process, I'm looking at Councillor down in there. We are consulting with residents in Pontedillas as we speak. We are consulting with people with the Walters Road scheme that goes from the Castle Ward up into Uplands and involving Sketty as well. So many of our schemes, particularly the large ones and the ones that have the biggest impact, we are actively consulting with. There's Penllygedig or Signan. We're actively consulting with that, with the ward members and members of the public. That's before we've started to build anything. So there are very good examples of, particularly as I said, on the major schemes where we do consult, prior to doing any work anyway. So,
okay, thank you very much.
Just to add to what Councillor Thomas said as well, Councillor Holly, just to say, look, there are occasions when there are individuals who, regardless of the amount of consultation that you do, are simply don't want the scheme to happen. And we have had instances where we have engaged, the officers have given comprehensive answers to questions that have come in, and then that information has either not been passed on in full or has been misrepresented, which has again confused the community. So of course we'll try and improve, but there are individuals out there, unfortunately, who will seek to distort the situation and to confuse and alarm residents unnecessarily.
You're quite right, Leader, and let's be blunt about it. It's not only residents, there are perhaps individual candidates or whatever, councillors who may want to misinterpret what has been said. And this is why I think myself, I said Councillor Thomas about a letter drop, actually stating the actual facts might actually be a better, telling the public, this is what we're doing, this is the consultation process, etc., etc. But anyway, thank you for your answers.
No problem. Okay. Thank you for that. Are there any other councillors present who want to ask a question before we move on to the next item? If not, before then, we go to item 7, which is the first of the major budget reports. It's not on the agenda, but I'd like to invite Councillor Holly as chair of the Scrutiny Committee to provide some feedback from the scrutiny session we attended with the scrutiny panel in the recent days. So over to you, Councillor Holly.
Thank you very much, Leader. And again, can I thank everybody that took part in our consultation process in social services and education. We have sent you a letter which outlines our the view that was come from members, both the members of the social services scrutiny board and also the education one. I think the first thing to say is that we welcome this huge increase in the amount of money that we've received in the uplift from the Welsh Government. And I'm pretty sure there are people on this call, I know Councillor Robert Francis Davies and myself have been around an awful long time, and I cannot remember any time we've had such an increase, and it's more than welcomed. And after the number of years that we haven't had increases, I think it's more than welcomed, and it's a fillet for everybody, especially after the problems of the pandemic, etc. So I think it is really welcomed. I think there are a couple of issues, if you'd allow me to highlight. I think one of the first things is in the joint social services, there was a disparity in the fact that the increase was 8.5 million, and yet it showed 16 million in the actual sheets. Now I've had this conversation with the 151 officer, Mr. Ben Smith. It does show, and I think the narrative of it is about a general increase right across the board. The 8.5 is to put us in a position of enhanced facilities, and the rest of the money is to increase what we currently have, but not to enhance. So I think it's a really good indication. I think the education about the phased rollout of the free school meals and the emerging implications of the Additional Learning Needs Act, I think those are the two worries that came out of the Education Scrutiny Board, and I think that's one that we are still going to be concerned about, and I think that will carry on for some time to come because of the promises that were made there. I think overall it is an extremely good budget. It's extremely good to see such an uplift. I think the fact is, though, that the warnings that come with, as Mr. Ben Smith usually says, covered all this with a number of warnings, and that is, although it's a 3-year plan, our finance, the first year is really good, the second year might not be so good, and the third year probably won't be as good as that. So I think all in all, whilst we welcome this year, is a cautionary note for the future. We look forward to further discussion as time goes on about how the outcome of the budget is going along. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Holly, and again, thank you for the invitation to attend scrutiny. We found it a very useful session. I hope members did too. What I would say is that in terms of the points, I certainly agree with you that we have to have an eye on future years, and we know that the very positive settlement that we've been able to agree with Welsh Government this year is front-loaded, and that it won't be as significant in future years. So that is something we have to do in terms of managing resources over the coming period. On the other points you've raised, I think we can pick those up as we go through the reports, Councillor Holly, and we'll address them as we go, if that's okay. But again, thank you for the work on this, and please take our thanks back to the scrutiny panel.
I will, and again, thank you very much.
Okay. If we move then to the budget reports, and Mr. Smith, I assume you're going to speak to them individually, but take them as a block, I would have thought, in terms of your comments. But I'll hand over to you and let you decide how you wish best to go through them.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, with your indulgence, I'm going to say some general points first of all to consider them as a block, but I then will take each of them in turn. And I'm going to focus more on the first one because the budget monitoring one only comes here. All of the others go to council, and the complexity and sheer number of reports means I could be here for an awful long time otherwise. So with your indulgence, in terms of some general observations, I must place on record my immense thanks for my fantastic finance teams who continue to work miracles, often at short notice as a result of announcements made at sometimes the 10th, 11th or 12th hour, all with the best of intentions at UK Welsh Government level. But they do require reworks upon reworks upon reworks of the budget process. And in previous years, I've joked about sometimes it feeling the last couple of years like the budget book needs to be put together with Velcro. Well, this year I wish I'd booked a visit to the fuzzy felt factory because it's all been thrown up in the air to some extent. But there's an awful lot of fuzzy felt when I go through these reports, and it is a good position to be in, to be worrying about what we do with some of the sums of money. And as you've already alluded to, as is Councillor Holly, yes, there is some front loading, significant front loading, which means that my advice to you throughout, which will be in its usual slightly tongue-in-cheek but with serious messages around, I urge you to weigh the longer term implications, and we will continue to respond to events and announcements as they occur throughout. The last 2 years have been really, really challenging, and to some extent we've been worrying about COVID and the ending of COVID monies. I think we are going to see a whole raft of further convulsions as we see the secondary economic effects wash through. And I'm sure as we get through today and ultimately through to council, there will be a number of things where we'll be weighing head and heart and trying to strike the right balance. I am absolutely convinced Cabinet and council will strike that right balance in terms of strategy and the big policy flourishes and strategic intent. The bit that's a little bit more difficult for me as your Section 151 officer is, of course, my regulators require me to exercise strong control and end up accounting for things to the nearest penny, and that can mean that things are a little bit fuzzy around the edges. But that's what I wanted to say by preamble to set the context of these reports, which often seg into one. So if I may, I'm going to go straight into report the first agenda item and take you through again. I'm only going to highlight the main items because there are an awful lot of papers here. So this is a report which sets out the third quarter monitoring as I saw it at the point in time in which it was written, and it is a fast moving document, and there will be some updates from me. So you will have 4 recommendations when we come back in due course once I've given my technical advice. I draw your attention very briefly. Section 2.3, in line with first and second quarter, indicates that services are overspent, but they remain only overspent as a result of COVID. If you stripped COVID out, I must give credit to my director colleagues. They are underspending if COVID hadn't happened. I draw your attention next to 2.9, where I indicate that I had central sums still available to offset those pressures that we face, and they are being recommended for being deployed fully to help manage the overall budget position for the current year. Section 3.2, the table indicates that not only do we have a contingency fund in year, we managed to conserve £10 million from the previous year, and taken together with all the other bits and bobs, there is £12.9 million available to you to offset the competing pressures and issues that are facing us. The upshot of the way in which we continue to bid competitively for money from Welsh Government is that in section 4.1, I still forecasted at the time I wrote this report that there was a £12 million service underspend, and I gave some indication as to where you could be topping up a number of reserves, which I think will become important when we discuss other elements of the budget papers in front of you. That is summarised in the table on the following page and indicates that there is at least a service underspend of £12 million, and the rest of the report goes on to indicate that there is, in normal fashion, at least £6 million of capital financing underspend, which takes you up to £18 million. I'm going to come back in a moment, but I would also draw your attention to the inflation risks that we all very much know about and the uncertainties that abound. So, for example, here I am nearly in March, and I don't know this year's pay award for our hard-working local government staff. So it's an interesting one in terms of the overall revenue position. The Welsh Government wrote to you and me, Leader, indicating that there was a share of at least £200 million further to come in the current year, which would be worth, on a good day, £15 million, on a very good day, at least £17 or £18 million more. And I can announce that 5 minutes before this meeting started, there was confirmation of a further £50 million uplift as a result of the debates in the Senedd earlier in the week and the supplementary budget arrangements, which will result in a further addition. So I think it is extremely likely there will be a very substantial further add to the outturn position, and that will stand you in good stead when you consider some of the other items. Section 5 draws your attention to the capital budget. Yes, it's a little bit smaller than last year's record budget, but it's still hovering around a budgeted £200 million mark, which is not to be sniffed at. The housing revenue account remains, in my usual phrase, tidy. We'll talk more about that when we come into the HRA budget setting reports. But in terms of the overall position, it is an extremely pleasing one, as you would expect. The trajectory is that it's improving. You have got bucket loads of cash coming in from announcements on a daily basis. And it sounds a bit sniffy of me to say it's very inconvenient to be given all these wads of cash and it's a bit late in the day. But it's a nice position to have as a local authority treasurer. And my final one, in similar vein, you'll be aware I've been advising that council tax has been running in deficit for 3 years and there are support mechanisms in place. I am pleased to confirm that I am in receipt yesterday and have claimed the grant offer of a £2.758 million one-off in-year grant support for council tax losses. That puts us right for yet another year and stands us in very, very good stead. So this is the report that I've focused the most on. Very movable feast. The numbers that are in there have probably doubled since the report report was written in a short space of a couple of weeks, but doubled in the right direction. You are going to have very substantial sums of money that you can consider in due course in outturn to put into relevant reserves, and those relevant reserves are likely to be the ones that you are then likely to be drawing on as part of a rapid dividend back to the community and helping manage the future budget pressures. So I go back to you, Chair, and indicate that there are 4 recommendations for you to consider on this one, but I'm more than happy to take questions because I'm conscious I've rattled through what is a very rapidly changing situation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Smith. And again, I'll thank you and your officers for the work you've been doing to try and track what is an evolving positive picture, but nonetheless very challenging situation. As Mr. Smith has said, we've had, following extensive discussions with Welsh Government about where help is needed for local government, and I'm pleased that the team that we have in the WLGA have been very effective in agreeing with Welsh Government a larger slice of the Welsh Government's budget coming to local government to support those key services. And that has been again an ongoing process over many months. But again, we saw some further results of that yesterday as more money turned up for Mr. Smith to be able to utilise and account for in the budget. Again, pay tribute to all of the cabinet members present and their department heads and directors for the work they've done, as Mr. Smith referenced, to continue to prudently manage the department's finances to ensure that we remain in a balanced or positive position for each of the budgets that we have in the council. As I said at the start of this meeting, the future years that we are seeing in terms of the profile will remain challenging. So again, what we do this year in terms of making sure that those budgets are in as positive a position as possible will stand us in good stead for future years. So you have the the recommendations in item 7. Mr. Smith has explained there are further changes which will be incorporated and reflected in future reports. But can I formally move those recommendations then, and can I ask for a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Lewis. So, Mr. Evans, if we can go to the vote on item 7, please.
Thank you, Leader. The vote has been launched. Has everybody had the opportunity to vote?
No, not me, Hugh. It hasn't come through.
Okay, I'll give it a moment. Have you had it yet, Councillor Pugh?
No, sorry.
It's all right, don't worry at all. I shall take your vote verbally. Are you for, against, or abstaining on this item?
4, please.
Okay. Has everybody else managed to vote successfully? Okay, I shall close the poll. And that is unanimous for, Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Thank you, Mr. Smith. For item 8, the medium-term financial plan, I'll come back to you if you have any further specific comments you wish to make on this report.
This one I can be fortunately very brief on. There is merely the one recommendation, which is that you've rolled forward the planning assumptions to council. There are no material changes in the MTFP to the combined report you had from me in January. It remains clearly the case that there are as many uncertainties as certainties around inflation, national pay awards, but also the certainty of a 3-year deal. The report is self-evident in terms of identifying those risks, and I am sure you'll be, as you've all already indicated, be weighing those longer-term risks against the here and now pressures when we come on to considering the revenue budget. So I do not propose to prolong any technical advice I need to give on this one because there is no material change from the advice I gave to you in January. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Smith. And I just draw members' attention. If we were in the physical chamber, I'm sure we'd have members of the public present who would often focus on this report. And again, it's a very positive outline that is painted in there, pointing to the fact of £87 million worth of potential investment going in over the period of the plan. And that demonstrates the intent that we have for investment in services over the coming years, despite all of the challenges that we will face as a result of the cost of living crisis, inflation, and all the other things that are going to be there to deal with over the coming years. So again, a very, very positive MTFP for the outlook of the services in the council. So I'll formally move the recommendations. Could I ask for a seconder again, please? Lewis, is there anybody who wants to comment on the NTFP? If not, I'll go to Mr. Evans again for the vote, please.
Thank you, Leader. The vote has been launched. Again. Okay, has anybody not received the vote?
Me, sorry, who?
Yeah, I haven't received anything either, Hugh.
Let's give it a minute then. A couple of miles to your houses from the Guildhall, so. Right, have you received them now?
No.
Okay, so I take Councillor Pughes first.
For, please.
And Councillor Smith.
For.
Thank you very much. And has everyone else managed to vote successfully? Okay, I shall close the poll then. And that is 100%, that's unanimous for, Leader.
Okay, thank you very much. Colleagues, we'll go then back to the next item, which is the revenue budget. And again, Mr. Smith, I'll come to you for some specific comments.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to go slightly slower on this one because this is one that's a little bit more complex and has a couple of movable feast items for me to draw your attention to. So without further ado, as I crank up the difference engine, in front of you, you have a budget report that recommended 3 sets of recommendations in a normal stylised manner for you to be taking forward to council. I will draw only your attention to the really pertinent matters and the significant changes. So 1.6 very much in bold emphasises how much money is going in. And further to Councillor Holly's comments, I can confirm that it is the biggest nominal amount put in since 1996, simply on the basis of the sheer size of the settlement we've had front loaded. I've been here only a decade and a bit, but we've gone all the way back to 1996 and we can find nothing this high because of the value of the settlement. 3.7 still references that there was a shortfall in the core capital funding, and that is the case. I should come back to that one when it comes to the capital report in front of you. The budget report table 1A, picking up on Councillor Holly and the Scrutiny Committee's other comments, is the budget is built incrementally, and as I've alluded to, there are a number of incremental changes and announcements as the settlement ended up being very heavily front-loaded and beneficial. So the reference to the £8.5 million for social care is 8.5 million additionally for social care, in the same way there was a £4 million additionally for schools. This was on top of the already near £30 million worth of items put in, which were all the usual suspects around the demographic pressures as a result of an ageing workforce, shares of pay and price inflation and all the other things. So it was very much that it was £8 million worth of general stuff plus a further 8.5, in the same way that schools got an additional 4 in terms of the funding wash through as a result of the very generous front-loaded settlement. And as I say, any of my complaints about it being difficult and a movable feast have to be taken in the context of it's in a very pleasant position to be in as a treasurer. So hopefully that's addressed the points that Councillor Holly rightly drew your attention to. It remains the case now that in 4.17, as we took through to the school budget forum and head teachers, they're now up to a 7% core uplift in funding. In due course. I mean, members are aware that there is often much scrutiny of the capital financing costs, and I draw your attention to 4.22. Whilst I've externalised all the borrowing for the general fund, there are some obligations to fund under the mutual investment model for Band B schools, and this council's position is that the council as a whole funds it, not schools, and that's why there are still some pressures in the system. The section that begins on 4.23 is around the fire authority and other levies. The figures were provisional. I'm pleased to confirm that the figure for the Corporate Joint Committee is now confirmed entirely, as is the one for the Swansea Bay Port Health Authority. We have been given late notice, not late in terms of late, but since the papers were produced, that there's a £28,000 reduction in the assumed amount for the fire levy. So that's one for you to think about when I come on to other matters in the report, because that's £28,000 worth of base funding potentially available for you to decide how to deploy. The rest of the report, I draw your attention then to 6.5. This is an important one because it's the items that reflect proposed changes, subject to any others you may consider today, since you received the January report, and they are a mix of things, but a mix of things that are either designed to achieve technically elegant solutions for the capital financing, which I will also refer to when we come to the capital report, but also matters that have been to council. So, for example, the Democratic Services Committee and then council agreed modest changes to members' ICT allowance costs, so it's only right that I build them into the budget. We have seen some announcements flowing from the Mayhill inquiry, and it seems appropriate and right that you should be putting some sums in for targeted items there. You can see the items in the table around items that have been indicated of interest to members or the public in terms of their feedback on consultation. There is no change to the staffing implications in section 7, which remain incredibly pleasing for the workforce and for you, I'm sure, as members as across the whole council in terms of the overall position. I am going to draw your attention then finally, before I come back to some policy options that you may wish to consider, to the Appendix A. As I indicated, this is a complex year and a bit of a movable feast, but that Appendix A makes very clear that I am giving you officer advice that says it's acceptable to me and right and proper that you're actually putting £44 million, way more than you got in settlement terms, into the net directorate expenditure line. At the moment, I have got some sums in for some increased inflation, because inflation abounds. It reflects the other items in there, but you will also note there is a very substantial draw from earmarked reserves. And in normal circumstances, as your treasurer, I would be very concerned at having such a large draw from reserves. But of course, you put £20 million and you've aspired to increase that further and may be able to increase it further again as a result of the update I've given you on the third quarter into the Economic Recovery Fund, which you committed to spend rapidly over 2 years. A combination of draws from the Economic Recovery Fund and from Capital Equalisation Reserve mean it is perfectly right and proper that you have very substantial sums being drawn from the earmarked reserves for this year. I do need you to be aware of what it means, that in terms it creates a temporary boost to the place and corporate services directorates. Education and social services are very much seen right with base budget increases as a result of the very substantial £33 million uplift in block grants. That table then squirts through and comes to a view as to what is reasonable for council tax. And for me, I say what is reasonable for council tax as a technical officer and a technical build. Inflation is expected to get to 7 or 8%. The council is not exempt from inflationary pressures. But the council has got a 9.3% uplift in its block grant. So my head, as your treasurer says, perfectly reasonable as is. But you have just had an update for the third quarter that says you are awash with sums one-off. And I'm sure you will want to weigh what is reasonable and acceptable for the electorate to be able to be paying when they've got 1,001 other pressures upon them. So the only bit at the moment that I've got as spare to advise you on is the £28,000 from the fire levy, but I have drawn your attention to very substantial sums that are still sat there in the inflation provision. And if you were minded to make any changes to that 2% figure, if you reduce it, I can reduce the cost of council tax reduction scheme. If you were to increase it, I'd have to put money into the council tax reduction scheme. So I'll probably pause at that point and remind you you've got a number of recommendations to move, but you may wish to give consideration as to whether there is anything else you wish to advise me that I should consider taking forward from Cabinet to Council. The final thing I would say is, because this is still a movable feast, there is still the scope over the next couple of weeks for further announcements to be made by either the UK or Welsh Government on such matters. And my final point in what is an utterly complex year, and it would be remiss of me not to mention it, this week you have had announcements around what the Welsh Government intends to do with the £150 of council tax and other related matters. It remains very much in development. My understanding as your Section 151 officer is that the council tax system and other mechanisms are going to be used as a distribution mechanism for targeting money. It is not going to be taken directly off the council tax bill. That may change in due course, but the reason I labour that point is that my officer advises you make the decision on council tax in isolation of the one-off rebate, refund or whatever it is. I emphasise that because over the longer term, you know that grants are going to get tighter, and any low council tax you can consider this year may need to be higher in future years. And obviously any intervention by UK or Welsh government which plays around with the tax system or introduces subsidies can be very distorting to the position over the years. But my strong advice is that you effectively set aside the £150 and other bits that are coming in. You make the policy decision on council tax to recommend to council, and as an officer I will work out how on earth I make all the other bits work in due course. As I say, there may be more on this when we come to council. So I do apologise for a very technical set of updates. I am more than happy to take questions on them because I've had to rattle through them. This is the one that it is important that you pause and reflect and I think weigh the officer advice, but also I do recognise that there are matters you may wish to ask me whether I can do any more for you for when you weigh the whole, not only for this year but for the future year. So I'll pause there, Leader. Remind you there are the recommendations, and my profuse apologies to Cabinet members. I know that has an awful lot for you to digest on this report. The others will get easier, I assure you. Thank you.
Okay, again, thank you, Mr. Smith, for that. Again, you always do your usual trick of trying to make complex finance easily understandable and trackable. Are there any technical questions to Mr. Smith before I move on to make more general political comments around the budget? I don't see any hands up. Okay, well, look, I won't repeat all of what Mr. Smith said, and I will reserve the majority of my comments for council in terms of the detail of what these large sums potentially enable us to do as part of delivery of services. But what I would say, which is referenced by Mr. Smith, this is a record-breaking investment by any measure. There has never been an investment in services this large in Swansea's history, and I think Mr. Smith has referenced that in his comments. Going back to 1996, we can find no year where this level of investment has gone into services, and we should be very proud of that and very grateful that we've been able to acquire such a large settlement from the Welsh Government. But slight word of caution, as I've said previously, that is a heavily front-loaded deal and future years are not as positive. So we do have to have one eye on the future in terms of anything we choose to do. There are some references in the report, as Mr. Smith had said, in terms of identifiable changes at this stage of the budget. And just to bring a couple of those forward, one obviously in there is around the change of bins, and I know Councillor Thomas will be saying more about this in council on the 3rd of March, but essentially it enables us to provide greater investment in bins, change how we collect some waste, but also provide solutions that communities have been looking for in terms of improved waste collection services for our bins. And I know Councillor Thomas will say more on that as we come, but it's a really positive change, and I'm grateful to Councillor Thomas and his officers for bringing forward those proposals. The others are, I think, relatively minor, and I will say more about them and more detail of them at council. Turning to the challenge, I think, that Mr. Smith gave us in terms of the level of council tax, we provisionally assumed an increase of around 2%. If you work through the figures, that's the figure that you get to in council tax. But of course, we did this at a time when we didn't have the full picture of the Conservative created cost of living crisis. And of course, we were hopeful that the government in London would have taken significant steps, either to levy a windfall tax on those energy providers and energy producers that have driven up bills and are making astonishing profits, which of course the government in London have refused to do. Instead, they have come forward with a very confusing system of rebates using the council tax system, as Mr. Smith has said, which I'm sure as an officer he wouldn't comment politically, but technically is a challenging situation which confuses many streams of tax and rebate systems. So it is a challenging thing for people to both understand, but also for us to deliver. So, I mean, I just wanted to break down the challenges that are now becoming much more visible. You will all recall that in recent council we passed a motion brought by Councillor Lewis, which dealt primarily with the energy aspects of this, but of course the cost of living crisis is even wider than just those terrible difficult energy bill rises. So we know that the Conservative government agreed to remove the energy cap. That immediately increased the ability for energy companies to take people's bills up by £700 a year. And that is something that has made it incredibly difficult for many families to be able to heat their homes. Now, very grateful that there is some help coming from UK government, but it's insufficient. And I'm very pleased to see the Welsh government move very quickly with targeted support of around £200 per household for those households in most need. And of course, the Welsh Government have also confirmed that additional £150 per household for properties in bands A to D. And for Swansea, that covers the majority of our properties in Swansea. Our most numerous properties are band B, but we obviously do have significant amount of properties in the bands A to D. So the majority of Swansea residences will benefit from that Welsh Government decision. And of course, Mr. Smith's team will be as efficient as ever in getting that out once the system is agreed. But, you know, it will not meet the £700 energy bill hike that most people will be facing as a result. And in addition to that, of course, interest rates have started to climb, as Mr. Smith advised us they were likely to do, and we are probably likely to see future rises in coming months. Again, very sensible decision by this council and Mr. Smith's team to borrow when interest rates were at their lowest. That has allowed us to lock in our borrowing. But of course, many households won't have that luxury, and they will be on variable bills, variable mortgage bills, and they potentially will see their mortgages rise by some £650, added to the £700 that they're already facing from their energy bills. On top of that, of course, the Tories in London refused to stand down the national insurance rise. That is going to hit households with an average of £250 per person increase in their national insurance rates. Higher earners will pay a lot more, of course. So again, that is another stealth tax already built in by the Conservative government that they've refused to stand back on, even though we're all facing this terrible crisis. On top of that, people going to the pumps will face potentially a £300 a year rise in their fuel bills to fill up their cars. So another bill that they will see hidden in fuel prices, but taxation going to the UK Treasury. On top of that, we believe food inflation will potentially add around £165 a year and could even reach £200 a year if inflation does tip at 7%, which is widely expected. And then, you know, you add all that together with, again, the personal allowances freeze, which of course was made by the Chancellor in a previous Tory budget. So people's personal tax allowances are also frozen and they will not increase. That's going to hit families by a further £135 a year. So, individuals, by £135 a year. So take all that together and you get to a sum potentially of people being some £3,000 a year worse off as a result of decisions made by the Tory government in London. But of course, they didn't stop there. They also then targeted the poorest workers in society, the working families and the working people who are receiving universal credit, and they cut £1,040, £20 a week from those in-work families who were receiving universal credit. So for those poorest workers, they potentially could be up to £4,000 a year worse off. That is the decisions made by the Tories in London. So, you know, as a Labour council, we cannot roll back all of that amount, but we will certainly, I know Cabinet have expressed their views in the meetings that where we've discussed this, and we want to do what we can to try and lighten the burden of families in Swansea and residences in Swansea who are facing those bills. So, Mr. Smith, what we would like to do is to look at a reduction in council tax. But before we do that, we also have a further request that we would like to consider. We are mindful of the Welsh Government's moves to shore up the salaries of the lowest paid in Wales and to move to a real living wage for social care workers and for others of £9.90 an hour. We very much support that. We think it's the right thing to do. Many of the people who are below that real living wage level will be those very key workers who've been out there day in, day out in care services, in in third sector employment and commission services, who have been there every day for people during the pandemic. And of course, it's right that they should move to a salary which helps them with the increase in pressures that are forced upon them by the Tory government. But we'd like to go further, Mr. Smith, and we'd like to move as fast as we can this year to move to the Welsh Government's aim of £10 per hour for all workers in this authority. That would be both for our directly employed staff and our staff who are employed through commissioned services. So it would be a new minimum salary paid to all members of staff in this authority. Now, our workings suggest that would probably equate to somewhere around £1 million a year of additional costs to go over and above what we have in terms of the funding coming from Welsh Government. So with a starting point of 2%, we would like to reduce that down to reduce the burden from council tax. But of course, we do accept that if we are going to make a change to go above the level that we're funding for salaries in the authority, that will come at a cost, and of course it will be a recurring cost, so it won't be a one-off cost, and it will be something that we will need to pay every year. So with that, Mr. Smith, we think we would probably end up somewhere just below 1%, and we would welcome your advice in terms of whether that's affordable, whether it's something we can do and present to council on the 3rd of March as our intention for that. And again, we would be indicatively looking at around 0.95, we feel, council tax level, and we would welcome your advice on that.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm just weighing up those bits, and I do get them entirely, the policy context. So first of all, the good news on the pay item, you'll be aware that the way I build the budget is that I factor in for real living wage increases, national minimum wage increases, some assumed bottom loading of the national pay award. I've built in an assumption for this year's pay award, albeit regrettably it's not been settled at national level, plus next year's pay award at a level that I've assumed 3%, but I've held some money centrally as well through the pay or price inflation. So the good news is that, yes, I recognise a figure of about £1.1 million, but it is fully accommodated within the assumptions I've built in to current year and next year. So that one is absolutely accommodatable, and as you rightly referenced, that'll be one that can only be formally considered and approved by council as part of the pay policy, but it is very much within the flexibility I have in the overall budget. You have indicated to me now that you wish to aspire to a council tax figure of around the 0.95% mark. That's effectively around the £1 million mark on council tax overall in terms of for those that are paying it. That feels about right, given that it meets your aspirations that you're talking about taking to council over the £10 wage. As a technical purist, I equally view it from a completely different lens, which is you've got pay and price pressures and a whole raft of other things, that some of which you can control and some you can't. I have drawn attention to you to the levies in the budget report. The levies do not appear separately on council tax. You've got to fund them yourselves, and that probably comes to about 0.75% that you'd have to put it up anyway. And I would remind you that council tax reduction scheme, you have to pay just about 20p in the pound for anything you do on council tax. So I can get to about the same 0.95%, but from a completely different technical build point of view. In terms of making a recommendation, it's also procedurally helpful for me to you have indicated your policy intent, because it may make it easier on the day for council. very quickly running through them, at that 0.95% level, you'd be talking about a recommendation of 0.95%, a council tax of £1,462.10 at band D. That can be afforded if I do the following three things. I have alluded to, well, more than alluded to, explicitly referenced that there's £28,000 in the base going spare now on the fire authority levy, and you can take that one with my blessing very, very easily. If you were to reduce from 2% to 0.95%, you can effectively bank £300,000 off the cost of the council tax reduction scheme. And so that's a relatively easy one for me as well. My maths, if it's right, and apologies if it's fuzzy around the edges, but you need to get another £1,092,000. Again, very broadly similar to that £1.1 million worth of costs for the wage commitments you've made. The only place I could take that off the base would be from the central inflation pot. I've got mixed views on that one. I'll give you my advice. In one sense, reducing it down to it's similar to the level of the current year, a little bit challenging given inflation was 2% and maybe 7%. That makes me a little bit nervous, but equally, we haven't spent the current year's central inflation provision on top of all the other bits we've built in. And given we've built in very significant cost increases across a whole raft of budgets, that's not an unreasonable position to take. And of course, in my third quarter update report, I've just indicated there are substantial increases in reserves. And if, for example, part of it were to go into balance sheet contingency, that would give me some comfort, because you have a budget in front of you that recommends still well over £3 million in central contingency. At the moment, £5.5 million in central inflation, which would be now £4.5 million. And taken together with the overall position, that is something that I could, as an officer, recommend is reasonable when it comes to me certifying that the budget is good in isolation, but also for the longer term. I think it is stretching at the absolute margins and acceptability of limits, because if you were to go any lower than that, you would probably be in the position where the overall yield from council tax started to drop, because I would remind you that council agreed my advice on the council tax base, which is it's starting to reduce a bit, as you've seen with the evidence falling in. We've seen we're a deficit on council tax collection for a couple of years, which the Welsh Government has made right. So that's a lot thinking on the hoof, but to aid your policy recommendation and to assist the Head of Democratic Services in terms of a minute, I will repeat it. If you were to take £28,000 off the fire authority levy, which is now firm, if you were to take £1,092,000 off central inflation, which I think is reasonable when I weigh all of the other advice I've given, that would give you sufficient to be able to also reduce council tax reduction scheme by £300,000 and enable you to recommend to council £1,420,000 less in the budgeted proposals, which would achieve that 0.95% policy aspiration. So I would be advising you that that is reasonable, and that you may therefore, when it comes to moving the recommendations, wish that that also be minuted. It would enable me to take a clean version through to council. There may be further discussion and debate, of course, at council across all of the members, and also there may be further announcements yet to come in the next 2 weeks. On the basis I've seen announcements by the hour and every 5 minutes, there may be more, so you will want to rightly reserve some flexibility in council chamber, but my officer advice is that that is reasonable when you weigh all of the matters in front of you. Thank you, Chair.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Smith, and that advice is very helpful, and we will take that advice in terms of how we construct the balancing of the budget to make what we've just proposed affordable. My understanding, looking across the documents that are already in the public domain across Wales, is that if council is minded to go ahead with that 0.95 council tax on the 3rd of March, that would see the majority of households pay just 20p extra as a result of the change in council tax. And of course, the money that it raises for council services, and specifically, as I said, for the wages of the lowest paid key workers, social workers and others in the authority and in commission services, is, you know, in comparative terms, it would be 1/13th, or just a very small amount compared to the amount that we're proposing to invest in education. 1/16th of what we're proposing to invest in social care, and it is significantly dwarfed by the investment that we propose across the council in terms of uplifts of 7%. So it's a 0.9% compared to the uplift in terms of investment. I think as well as I have reviewed, it looks as if this would equate to roughly the third lowest council tax rise proposed currently in Wales, and would again put Swansea at the lower end in terms of decisions on council tax for the coming year. But of course, other councils will make their decisions in due course. So, again, £44 million proposed into budget, a £10 per hour minimum salary to help the lowest paid, and a raft of investments which I intend to outline in more detail on the 3rd of March. So with that amended set of recommendations as described by Mr. Smith, Mr. Evans, if you will capture those. But before I formally move the report, I'll go to colleagues if anybody wishes to comment or add anything to the discussion in terms of this specific report. Nobody? Okay. If I can formally move the report with the suggested recommendations as outlined by myself and Mr. Smith, and if I could ask for a seconder, please.
Very happy to formally second, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. And if we could then launch the vote, Mr. Evans.
Thank you, Leader. The vote has been launched. Okay, usual process. Has anybody not received the vote electronically yet?
Me who again, sorry.
On me again, Hugh.
Yeah, we have to look into this. Thank you. Can I take your vote first, Councillor Pugh?
Yes, 4.
And Councillor Smith?
4.
Anyone else that didn't receive the electronic vote? No. Have you all been able to vote? I will close the poll then. And that is unanimous for, Leader.
Okay, can I thank you, colleagues, for that? We'll move then to item 10, which is the capital budget and programme for 22 to 27. Mr. Smith, come back to you again for any technical comments you wish to make.
Yes, there are a couple, I'm afraid, but this one is simpler than the last report. The capital programme is in front of you. Again, ideally in facts as I see them at the time at which I write the reports. As I've indicated, oodles of money keep getting announced on a nearly daily basis, and if those oodles of money come, you will have the right to be able to consider uplifting the capital programme further. I did in the revenue budget report indicated that there had been a £2 million drop in general capital support, and the revenue budget was built on that basis. The capital report in front of you was built on the basis that that £2,040,000 came in from revenue via the capital equalisation reserve, and that, I'm pleased to say, can still hold in the first instance, but you can go further than that. So there is again an officer technical advice to accept the one recommendation, but to make an amendment to recommend to council, which is there was a £70 million additional sum allocated for capital, and there may be more to come still, but I can only deal with what I know today. And I am in receipt of an offer of £5,023,754 for the current year, but unusually has full flexibility to be carried forward into 22-23. So for the purposes of the minute to assist the head of democratic services, again, effectively cutting to the long and the short of it, there is an additional £2.983754 million. So that's £2,983,754 to be able to be moved today, if you so intend to do so, to council, to be added to the capital programme, and my officers will be able to make necessary arrangements to ripple those through in terms of the report. So again, pleasing to have that additional money. It's again a problem for my officers to work it through. I get the fuzzy felt and the Velcro out once again, but it's nice problems to have. And as I've indicated, it may move again, but it would be wholly appropriate for me to give you the officer advice that you can receive the report, but that you should again make a change to the recommendation and move that additional sum for council, and we'll see what happens in the next couple of weeks. I don't intend to give you any other officer advice on this report, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Again, grateful for your work on this and for the technical advice. I would again recommend to Cabinet that we accept that advice and that we move those sums as Mr. Smith has outlined. The capital programme, even in the document as it stands without that amendment, again is almost record-breaking. It certainly represents per head of capita the largest capital programme in Wales. There is another capital programme which is slightly higher, but their population is significantly higher. So, per head of population, we're spending significantly more on our schools, on our general infrastructure, on our city centre, on our economy and on our communities than any other council in Wales by a large margin. And that, reflects the ambition that this Cabinet and this council has set out for some time now. So with Mr. Smith's amendment, that it will increase further by that nearly £3 million. And of course, when we come to Council on the 3rd of March, I will outline further what the delivery of those additionalities plus the capital programme will enable in the coming year in terms of capital investment. So very happy to move this report. And could I call for a seconder, please?
Very happy to formally second.
Thank you very much. Councillor Francis Davies, did you want to come in? You're on mute there, Councillor Francis Davies.
Thank you, Leader. Now that we've gone through these items on revenue budget and capital budget, I'd like to put on record my thanks to you, Leader, for the way that, as the Cabinet member with the responsibility for finance, the amount of effort and work that you put into this, and also to Ben Smith and his staff. I know they worked tirelessly through COVID. Budget time has not been easy when it is, as he said, changing, sometimes by the minute almost, to come up with these recommendations. And I think a vote of thanks should go to you and Mr. Smith and his department for the work that's been carried out on behalf of the citizens of Swansea, for getting this budget together and the amount of work that is being put in tirelessly by all. So just like that, put on record.
Thank you, Councillor Francis Davies. That's certainly appreciated by myself and I'm sure by Mr. Smith and his team. So thank you very much for that. It's getting more money is often as difficult as not having the money in the first place, especially when you've got to try and make the budget balance in a short amount of time. But thank you for that. We've had the report moved and seconded, so Mr. Evans will go now to the vote, please.
Thank you, Leader. The vote has been launched. Okay, has anybody not received the...
Again, here I have not it.
Oh, me.
There's something happening between Lasher and Guildhall.
It's the way to do that. Okay, Councillor Pugh, how do you vote?
4, please.
And Councillor Robert Smith?
4.
Has anybody else not received the electronic vote? No, you're okay. I shall proceed to close the poll then. And I see that is unanimous 4. Thank you very much.
Thank you, colleagues. Much appreciated. We'll note that. Now we'll move on to item 11, which is the housing revenue budget 22-23. Mr. Smith first, and then I'll go to Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Chair. I can be relatively brief on this one in terms of the officer advice. You'll be pleased to know these are less complicated in some respects than the general fund, but as important to housing tenants and yourselves, obviously. 3 recommendations in front of you. to be considered to be moving in due course. There are some overspending pressures in the current year which will draw down on reserves as set out in section 2, all relatively modest and understandable given those material costs and other backlog items that as a result of COVID. You've got to weigh yet again what's affordable and reasonable in terms of increases in rents versus what you intend to spend them on. So section 3.4 indicates that you would be being asked to raise the rent by 3.1%. In terms of my technical officer advice, I would particularly draw your attention and anyone who listens to this debate to 4.15. The amount that is raised from that rent increase is shown in that table at 2.2 million, and you'll be pleased to see that effectively all of that is spent on the first two items, which are increased revenue repairs and increased revenue contributions to capital. Everything else that you're doing, the HRA officers and the lead member will come in a moment, are proposing is to absorb all of that themselves. And as a result of that and the uplift in that table, in 4.1.6, you can see yet again the very, very substantial amounts of income as a result of the surplus on the HRA that is made available to underpin a very, very large HRA capital programme for modernisation, improvement and additional housing. So whilst the HRA faces slightly different issues to the general fund in terms of timing and the sources of funding, and there not being their same obvious front loading from block grant, you've got very similar messages of very large sums being invested in the capital programme and very large sums being, where there are increases, they are being fully ploughed back into the bits that matter to people, the frontline stuff, and officers and members are sweating the rest themselves. So I thought it important I give that officer technical advice, because some may note there's a difference in treatment in some respects between general fund and housing revenue account, but all perfectly logical and understandable. And the bit I would especially emphasise is that what is being raised is being spent and more on both revenue and capital. And apologies if I've stolen too much of the lead member's thunder on that, but I think it is important I give that technical officer advice. So without further ado, I will now defer to Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you to Mr. Smith for highlighting there is a significant difference between the general fund and the housing revenue account. I think it's worth a reminder, and subject to approval of this report, I will be saying the same at council, that the HRA is ring-fenced and therefore it is completely unlawful for the general fund to subsidise the HRA. So the only way that the HRA can create an income to fund the capital programme that we have is through rents, it's through borrowing, and it's through government grants. So this is why it's important that cabinet members I know will understand that it's intrinsically linked, the rental income, to the capital programme that we have for the HRA, which is extensive. Back in December 2019, the Minister for Housing and Local Government approved a policy for a 5-year period running from April 2020 for rent setting in Wales. And we are guided by Welsh Government's rent setting policy. There was within that policy a clause that enabled Welsh Government to set a lower increase than CPI +1 should CPI exceed 3%. Not anticipated, but CPI did exceed 3% back in September last year. And so Welsh Government decided to set the maximum rental increase at 3.1%. This report recommends that we set that increase at 3.1 because we need to take into account, I feel, that Swansea Council rents still remain hugely competitive compared to other social landlords across Wales. Out of 49, we rank 29th highest. And also in comparison to private rents in Swansea, which are circa £130 per week, this rental increase will see our rents at circa £102 per week. So it's important that we understand that this still isn't a significant rise compared to other social landlords across Wales, and even when it's in comparison with neighbouring authorities. The other thing which I think it's important to flag up and highlight is that a significant number of our tenants will not be impacted by this increase because they'll be in receipt of housing benefit and universal credit. The increase will mean that we will see income exceeding expenditure this year by £28.3 million, which will contribute significantly towards the capital programme that is planned in the next report of £58.1 million. And so I'm very happy to move the recommendations on page 127. It's important, as Mr. Smith has outlined, that this is not just towards the capital programme, but also, very importantly, towards funding our frontline staff who are helping tackle homelessness, support rough sleepers into permanent supported accommodation. And so that team is expanding as part of this additional income as well. And so, Leader, move the recommendations. It's recommended that the following budget proposals be recommended to Council for approval. Item 1, rents to be increased in line with Welsh Government policy as detailed in section 3. Item 2, that fees and charges and allowances are approved as outlined in section 4. And item 3, that the revenue budget proposals as detailed in section 4. Happy to formally move.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Lewis. I'm happy to formally second this, and I just emphasise a couple of points that you and Mr. Smith have made. I mean, it is really important that people understand this account is very different from general financing, as we've said. It's a ring-fenced account. So if we are unable to raise the money that is required to build more homes for people, to make homes warmer and better for people, and to invest in the thousands of homes that we have across Swansea, to reduce people's energy bills as we've been doing, and of course to build that next generation of new homes so that people don't have to wait on the waiting lists for homes in our authority. The only way we can fix it is by raising the money in the way outlined in this report. And of course, we have set out our ambitions to reduce waiting lists in Swansea, to build more homes and to build homes which have very low energy bills. And that is critical given what people are facing currently. And I just wish at a UK government level, there had been an emphasis on house building in the way that it has been for Swansea Council, and the ability for us to increase the availability of affordable housing and social housing in the way that we are doing, that would have potentially avoided many of the real difficulties that people face across the UK currently. But it is really important, if we were to make our ambition to build more homes, to make the homes that we already have better and cheaper to run, warmer, safer for people, that we take the steps outlined in the report. So thank you for bringing this report, Councillor Lewis. Are there any other members who wish to comment? Councillor Francis Davis.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Councillor Lewis for this report. I would agree fully with what Councillor Lewis put forward, and yourself, Leader. It's such a shame that there's so many thousands of people still waiting for homes, council houses. I know we made an effort over recent years to build some of the first council houses. In many a year that I can remember, I think it's about 30 years that we built houses prior to that. But when you think there's thousands of people waiting for homes, affordable homes, and the increase that is going on in materials, it's not going to be easy to satisfy this demand, and it would need government intervention to make sure that we can provide money to provide homes, much needed homes, for some of the most vulnerable people that we've got in our country, not just Swansea. So congratulations, Councillor Lewis, on the work that you are doing here. It's with a reluctance in some way that we've got to increase rents, but it's the only way, because of the ring fence in the housing revenue account, that we can actually get this money to actually fulfil the needs of our citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Francis Davis. Councillor King.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Really also happy to support the comments that have been made, and thank councillors for bringing the report. Particularly, I think, referencing the work around homelessness and the support from staff. And I hear examples often of the support that's been given to care leavers and also young people who are at risk of homelessness, who've able to have that support. And I think that's really important that we're able to continue to provide that. And I'm sure we can all give examples of the fantastic investment that's been undertaken in our council houses within all our wards over the last couple of years, and I think that's also really important to note, that we need the investment to continue to do that. So I'm really strongly supportive of the report, so thank you for bringing it.
Thank you very much. Are there any further comments? If not, Councillor Lewis, anything further you want to add before we go to the vote?
No, I welcome the support from Cabinet colleagues and the comments that have been made. The teams are doing an excellent job, in fairness, and I'm really proud of the excellent work that they've been doing, particularly throughout the pandemic, and working very closely, better than ever, with our partners and third sector partners as well. So my thanks for the comments, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. Okay, Mr. Evans, we'll go to the vote then, please, on this item.
Thank you, Leader. The vote has been launched. Okay, then it will be unable to vote.
Me.
Could you vote, Councillor Pugh?
For, please, who?
And
Myself again, Hugh, yes, and I'm for.
okay, anyone else? Okay, I shall close the poll then. And that is unanimous for, Leader.
Many thanks, colleagues. Okay, we'll go to the next one then, which is, let me just get my agenda back up. So we got the housing revenue account, capital and Programme 22 to 26. Again, I'll come to Mr. Smith first for technical comments and then on to Councillor Lewis.
You'll be pleased to know, Chair, this is the last of my budget reports today, and I've got very little to say on this. I have nothing to say in terms of technical updates that are required. I merely draw your attention to the 3 recommendations, but also more importantly, draw your attention to the second page of Annex A, which sets in context the stuff you've already talked about. That couple of £1 million on revenue uplift, you see the £28 million going in as direct revenue contributions, and you see a housing revenue capital programme broadly supported by borrowing and direct revenue contributions from that ring-fenced housing revenue account that enables you to recommend to council a capital HRA programme of over £300 million. And I think that just shows the sheer leverage that comes from that previous decision that you've already taken to recommend to council. So I have nothing further to add, and I will therefore hand over to Councillor Lewis once again.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you to Mr. Smith. I will be brief, but there were just a few points that I wanted to highlight. Members will note the revised programme this year of £47.42 million, certainly not an insignificant amount. The next financial year, the proposed investment of £58.1 million. This will include £12 million specifically for more new council homes and acquisitions, where we have been purchasing back our council right to buy properties and bringing them back into council stock to create more homes and more provision to meet that desperate need. In addition to that, I'm pleased to say that we'll be looking at investing £7 million every year for the next 4 years in solar and battery storage on our existing council homes. This will be a step on the journey towards decarbonisation, but just a word of caution that this obviously will help people in terms of tackling fuel poverty, but it will not bring those properties to net zero. And there will be planned phases in terms of upgrading to improve thermal performance of our homes. But the actual overall estimated cost of bringing all our council properties, all 13,600 of them, to net zero is estimated in the region of £750 million. And obviously we cannot raise that regarding any income that we have at the moment, we will need extra subsidies and grants from Welsh Government or UK Government or both in order to meet that demand. So I'm very pleased and very proud to present this absolutely ambitious capital programme. I'm proud of this administration's track record in terms of investment in Welsh housing quality standards and the continuing journey to decarbonise our council properties. Thank you, Leader, and very happy to formally move.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis, and again, very happy to second this. And you know, I won't repeat all the comments I made on the previous report, and you've outlined them eloquently there. We have a very proud programme of what we're doing in Swansea in terms of house building, and I'm really pleased with the work that you and your team have been able to deliver. I'm very proud of what you and your team have been able to deliver for the residents of Swansea, and I just look forward to taking it to an even bigger level and an even new level of ambition in the coming years. So may that long continue. So thank you for that. Happy to formally second. And Mr. Evans, if we can go to the vote, please.
Thank you, Leader. The vote is launched. Anybody need to vote?
Yeah, 4, please.
Councillor Smith.
4.
Any others needing to vote verbally? Okay, I shall close the poll. And that again is unanimous for, Leader.
Great, thank you very much, colleagues. And that concludes the budget element of the report. Can I again thank Mr. Smith and his team, and can I ask Mr. Smith to relay those thanks to his members on behalf of myself and Cabinet for all the work that's been done to pull together this very, very impressive but challenging budget. So thank you for that. Can we now then move to the next item, which is the annual review of charges, social services 21-22. If I could call Councillor Child in, please.
Thank you, Leader. This is a standard report within statutory parameters. Should we wish to change anything beyond a set limit, we would need to go to consultation. However, this year we're proposing not to change things beyond the set limit that would trigger that. All the changes are in Appendix A of the list, which is a 3% increase this year. I'll just remind people that the 3% is within a means-tested formula for almost all of them, and a capped level of payment, even if assessed as people are assessed as being able to afford to pay. So it's the same report as last year, and the year before, I believe, as well, to the Cabinet. So I'll move. But before I finish, I didn't get a chance to come in and talk about the real living wage. The majority of that, a large number of people affected by that, work in the social care sector, and I just wanted to say how much I support the council's move to include that in the budget, possibly going forward. More than welcome for those workers. But going back to the point in hand, propose this matter, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Child. That's grateful for you moving that and fully agree with your comments. I'm very happy to formally second that report. Okay, and is there anybody who wishes to come in and comment before we move to the vote? If not, the card should now have appeared on your screens. Can I ask you all to cast your vote, please?
Okay, anybody unable to vote?
Yes, I'm for. I'm going to leave the meeting and try and come back to see if it works.
Okay, and then Councillor Pugh.
No, my laptop is now working, so we're back on track.
So the sun is out now, that's the reason. Anybody else? Okay, I shall close the poll. And that is unanimous for, Leader.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Evans. Thank you, colleagues. On then to our next item, which is the tree management strategy, and I'll go to Councillor Thomas.
Will you give me one moment while I just make sure that Councillor Smith is back in? Sorry,
Absolutely,
Leader.
no problem.
Sorry, Leader, the strategy is with me.
Apologies, Councillor Lewis. I'm not on the right page of my report, just on the heading, but thank you for the prompt.
And Councillor Smith is back in. Thank you all.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Lewis then, please.
Thank you, Leader, and I will be brief. And as you've kind of pointed out, I think it would be remiss of me not to mention that this strategy has been through the hands of a number of Cabinet colleagues, Councillor Mark Thomas and Councillor David Hopkins, to name but a few. And so I can't take credit for bringing it here today because many members have been involved in the formulation of it. Also wanted to pay tribute to the Policy Development Committee for its consideration of the policy as well. My thanks to them for their work on this. And sincere thanks to the officers, Paul Mellor and Deb Hill in particular. But just to highlight a few things, it's a real privilege that Swansea has been chosen to be a champion city in terms of the Queen's Green Canopy celebrating the Platinum Jubilee. That coincides and actually complements the tree management strategy, where we have a significant ambition to plant thousands of trees across the city and county of Swansea. This will be involving schools, parks, housing land, and also highways and cycle routes, as Councillor Mark Thomas referred to earlier. The strategy notes that we will at times have to replace damaged trees or diseased or dangerous trees, but that we will always try wherever possible to replace those trees with new ones. We will try and give careful consideration to the species and where we locate trees in terms of future planning. And so it's critically important that we don't just plant trees everywhere. We make sure that they're in the right place and the right location to give the maximum benefit. You will see the recommendations on page 199 that it's recommended that the tree management strategy is agreed. And more importantly, I think a mapping exercise is carried out to identify potential sites, zones for planting on council-owned land, subject to future funding and maintenance availability. So it's a hugely ambitious programme. I think it's a feather in the cap for Swansea that we've been chosen to be a champion city for the Queen's Green Canopy and the Jubilee. And I'm really pleased to bring this strategy here today and happy to take any questions or comments. Happy to formally move, Leader.
Many thanks, Councillor Lewis. Fully agree with all of your comments there, and we should be rightly proud of the work that we've been doing to tackle climate change, and specifically, as you say, with tree planting and the green canopy and the green infrastructure. I'll go to Councillor Thomas to speak, and obviously probably formally second.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And yeah, I'm more than happy to second this report. And in particular, I think what the report does, I mean, for us as councillors, we're very aware of the workings of the authority, but I think mostly for the general public, they probably believe that tree planting comes totally under the responsibility of our Parks Department, and to that extent, they're largely correct. But as is highlighted in the paper here, you know, we have schools and the Education Department, which is responsible for tree maintenance, tree planting on their school grounds. We've got our where homes are, housing, land comes under them. We've also got several, other departments of nature and biodiversity teams also carry out large planting, as well as volunteer groups and friends of. So it's very widespread. It's not just one, and having a strategy helps to bring all of that together, I feel, and it's there to explain to the public that we have this driven ambition to plant more trees, but there's a lot more to it than just saying we're going to plant trees. It's choosing the right locations. Accessibility, for example, is one key component, because after we plant trees, we generally got to continue watering them and looking after them for at least the first season after they planted. So accessibility and all that. So you can't just put trees in the ground. And as I think Councillor Lewis indicated, it's in choosing the right trees for the right locations as well. So there's a lot of thought that goes into it. There's a lot of time and effort goes into it. And I think that this is going to take us forward greatly within the authority. And I'm more than happy to second the report, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Thomas. Thank you for seconding that as well. I'll go to Councillor Francis Davis next, and then Councillor Child.
Thank you, Leader. Happy to support this. We're continually improving our city and the green in our city, and it's always amazes me that when I drive up the Swansea Valley to see how that has changed from a moonscape many years ago, where we now have such a huge urban forest in Swansea. The desolation of that during the Industrial Revolution took a lot of work by officers over many, many years to change that into a green lung for Swansea. How the health has improved of the people of Swansea East because of it. It's great to see now with the river, with salmon back in the river and the wildlife back on the Fenrod Lake that we see. And this is because of the continuous cleaning up of Swansea and the cleaning up of the valley through greening and the trees that are being put there. This strategy is just another part of that journey that we're on to making Swansea, a better, fairer, greener city. So I'd like to support the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Francis Davis. Councillor Child.
Yes, I hugely welcome this report as well. Trees are absolutely vital to the ecology of the area that we're living in. They're vital. They're a vital element in combating climate change as well, because of the way they turn CO2 to oxygen. They're really important in other aspects too. They're important in flood prevention as well, preventing runoff and soaking up the water from the rainfall. They're part of the well-being that people experience from green spaces, and they're a key element of that. So I think this is very welcome. It's good to have a strategy in place. It'll bring benefits to Swansea, and I hope it encourages other landowners, private and public, within Swansea area as well to follow suit. Because although we can take a lead and we have a significant area of land, there are many others that contribute to this as well throughout Swansea. So it's an excellent report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Child. Absolutely, again, agree with the comments both you and Councillor Francis Davis have made. Councillor Lewis, is there anything else you wanted to add before I go to the vote?
Nothing further to add. Thank you, Leader.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Evans, then.
Thank you, Leader. The vote has been launched. Okay, has anyone been unable to vote electronically? So you need to record a verbal vote.
Yeah, it's still not reaching me for.
That's a 4. Any others?
Yeah, sorry, I don't know what's happened. I'm 4-2.
That's okay. Everyone else okay? I shall close the poll then. And that is unanimous for Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Thank you, colleagues. On then to the next item, which is item on the promoting affordable credit policy, and I'd like to welcome Councillor Downing as the chair of the Policy Development Committee. Councillor Downing, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. The Poverty Reduction PDC are asking Cabinet to adopt a policy which embeds the promotion of affordable credit. And as we are all aware, Leader, borrowing is now a necessity for many people on low incomes simply to make ends meet. The COVID-19 pandemic has disproportionately impacted low-income households, resulting in an increase in the number of people and households using credit to pay for everyday essentials such as food, clothing and utilities. This impact, together with the rise in the cost of living and energy crisis, is compacting this issue further, as we heard earlier on during the budget debates. Through promoting access to affordable credit, the Council will be helping to reduce over-indebtedness and supporting people and households to improve their financial resilience. This policy aims to ensure that Swansea Council takes appropriate action to tackle high-cost lending and targeting of high-cost credit by promoting access to equitable and affordable credit for all residents in Swansea, by embedding the approach into the Council's policy framework. This policy aims to end the targeting of high-cost credit, prevent high-cost borrowing, and promote access to more equitable and affordable credit. Therefore, we will promote, encourage and support the take-up of free and impartial debt advice through general campaigns, proactive offer whenever a resident discloses that they are in financial difficulty, commit to work with Swansea credit unions, promote and establish credit union collection points where possible, promote and encourage membership of the credit union to new and existing council tenants, promote and encourage membership of the credit union to new and existing staff, block payday loan sites on council computers and public access computers and signposts to Swansea credit unions, citizen advice and money advice service. Promote the Financial Conduct Authority register of regulated lenders on the council website and promote reporting of any loan sharks activities to the Wales Illegal Money Lending Unit and Swansea Trading Standards. Provide loan shark awareness training to staff and to county councillors. And this policy will be implemented through a 3-year action plan reviewed annually. And just to add, Leader, that to support this, the PDC are working on the individual debt policy and also ways of promoting other ways in which our not only tenants but residents can claim benefits which they're missing out on. But before I finish, Leader, I would like to thank officers Amy Hopkins and Auntie Richards for their tremendous work on getting this policy together. I also would wish to thank the PDC for all their work and the previous chairperson, Councillor Mary Sherwood, for helping bring this policy to its conclusion. Thank you, Leader.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Cowling. Very much agree with your comments, and a very, very timely piece of work, and will be of benefit to many people across the authority who, unfortunately, as you've said, are being driven into debt by the cost of living crisis and all of the other pressures that they're seeing, and often their only option, especially if they got poor credit, is to try and approach unreputable lenders or those loan sharks, and the sort of support and advice that this provides will be a lifeline to many people in the authority. But can I also thank you and the PDC and the previous chair for the work that was done on this, if you could take those thanks back, I would be appreciative of that. So I'll now go to Councillor Gibbard. Councillor Gibbard, if you would like to.
Oh, sorry, Leader. Councillor Pugh,
apologies, Councillor Pugh, your hand wasn't up. Come to you first. Apologies.
Sorry, I didn't think to put my hand up. I thought it was automatic. Sorry. Look, I'd like to thank Councillor Downey for bringing this morning, and it has been a long time in the work. And this was started in 2018. This policy in the Poverty PDC, and it's done exactly what the PDC has set up to do, is to produce a policy from scratch, and the partnership working involved in this has been fantastic, and the work that the PDC and the officers have put in is just been amazing. And the PDC needs to fit in with the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act, which mandates public bodies to work in accordance with the Sustainable Development Principle to achieving the wellbeing goals. And like Councillor Downey said, now more than ever, this is needed. We have a responsibility to promote this message. We are in difficult times financially and further hardships are coming. We all know this. And at these sort of times are when unscrupulous people will prey on our most vulnerable residents. We desperately need to try and direct people away from the high interest lenders where they know people can't afford the repayments that they force on them, and they get people further and further into debt and horrendous situations. There will be a 3-year action plan set out for officers and members to ensure that our commitment to promote people to take the free advice and support and affordable credit and will help in financial difficulties. So, you know, I'd like to thank Swansea Credit Union. They've been with us from day one on this, helping, guiding and everything. And we are obviously more than happy as a council to promote you know, this safer way of borrowing and having help to deal with matters, not just borrowing in a loan. So again, if I can thank the PDC, this is an excellent piece of work, and all the officers, including Joe Portwood, that was leaving and now isn't leaving. So that's fantastic news, and I'm sure Phil will be glad to still have her in the PDC. So excellent work, everybody. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Pugh. Okay, Councillor Gibbard.
Thank you. I don't have much to add already to what yourself, Leader, and Councillor Pugh and Councillor Down have already said. Just that, you know, just to recommend, this is an excellent policy, part of a suite of things we're doing as a council to help tackle the cost of living crisis and make sure that our residents are not you know, pushed into the arms of some of these unscrupulous lenders, and you know, some that are perfectly legal but just not affordable to people as their interest racks up. So yeah, I mean, obviously really important that we do all we can as councillors, as a council, to promote affordable credit when people need it and to help them get into debt, which obviously ruins people's lives. So thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Gibbard. Okay, so could I ask perhaps if the Cabinet member wishes to move the report formally?
Yes, please, Rob. I wish to move it formally. I should have said it, sorry.
Thank you very much, and I'm very happy to second the report formally. So, Mr. Evans, if we could now go to the vote.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Yeah, that is launched, Leader. Okay, anybody need to vote verbally?
For.
Councillor Smith, for. Anyone else? Has anybody else had any difficulties in voting? No, I should close the poll then. And that is unanimous for, Leader.
Many thanks, colleagues. We'll move then to item 16, which is the optimised retrofit programme. If I can go again to Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Leader. Sorry for the amount of reports today. It's a busy day. Yes, my apologies to Cabinet for bringing these 2 bids here retrospectively, but as the report states, there's a very short timescale to turn around these grant applications. And so my thanks to Dave Mayrick and Carol Morgan for submitting those with very short notice back in November last year. The 2 bids, if I could just outline them very briefly. One is the Land and Building Development Fund, the LBDF bid. That is for 3 schemes. One is at former Brondig House in Mansleton. The second one is land at Creswell Road Place. And the third one, the former Gosainan Business Park on West Street in Gosainan. So that's the LBDF fund. And then in addition to that, there's the ICF, the Integrated Care Fund application for the purchase of 6 units to be adapted for people with mobility needs. So very pleased to bring these, albeit retrospectively, and very happy to formally move this report.
Many thanks, Councillor Lewis. Very happy to formally second this report. Do any other Cabinet members wish to speak on the report? If not, thank you for that. We'll go then to Mr. Evans.
Thank you, Leader. The vote's launched. Councillor Smith.
I'm for.
Thank you. Anybody else needing to vote verbally? Has everyone received the vote? Okay, I shall close the poll. And that is unanimous for, Leader.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, sorry, Councillor Lewis, do you wish to come back in?
Yeah, yes, please, Leader. If I can just check with Monitor and Officer, agenda item 70, a governor for Morriston Comprehensive School. Do I need to declare a personal interest?
Have you been appointed as a governor by the local authority?
Yes, somebody else.
No, sorry, are you a governor of the school?
I am a governor of.
Yeah, you're. Sorry, Councillor Lewis, are you a governor of Morriston Comprehensive School? Did you say?
Yes, I am.
Yes, and you've been appointed by the local authority.
Yes, that's right.
Personal interest only, unless you have a close personal association with the nominee.
Apologies for not declaring it earlier. I declare a personal interest only, and I suspect Councillor Francis Davis will be following me as well.
Yes, likewise.
Okay, thank you both for that declaration. If you can fill out the relevant forms you'll get from Mr. Evans. Okay, thank you. We'll then move to item 17, which is local governor appointments. Councillor Smith.
Yeah, I formally move the report as the monthly appointments, Leader.
Okay, thank you very much. Very happy to formally second the report. If we could therefore move to the vote, Mr. Evans. Thank you.
The vote's launched.
On this one, I don't vote, Hugh.
Oh, indeed. Anybody else unable to vote? No, I shall close the poll then. And that is unanimous for, Leader.
Okay, thank you very much. Move then to the next report, which is the Western Mogul Regional Partnership Governance Framework. And I'll go to Councillor Childs.
Thank you, Chair. I move this report. Regional Partnership Board is, as I'm sure many of all the Cabinet know, is the joint board between ourselves, the Patoba Council and the Health Board, but it has a number of other elements and participants in the board as well. And this is to strengthen perceived weaknesses in the structure because they came to light in the initial COVID crisis and actions taken then, which didn't fully involve all the partnerships, all the partners involved in the Regional Partnership Board. So this strengthens the position on the board of citizens, of carers, and the third sector to a degree as well. I very much welcome it and move. I'll keep moving it if you want me to.
My apologies, Councillor Child, my button was stuck there. Thank you very much for that. I'm happy to formally second. Are there any other comments before we move to the vote? If not, Mr. Evans, if we could launch the vote, please. Thank you.
Thank you. The vote is launched.
I'm for you.
Any others? I shall close the...
Yeah, it hasn't come through to me either. I'm for.
Anyone else? No. I shall close the poll there. And again, that's unanimous for, Leader.
Thank you very much, colleagues. On then to the next report, which is the FPR7 Welsh Government's Transforming Towns Placemaking Grant. Councillor Francis Davis.
Yes, I have great pleasure in moving this FPR7 report, the Transforming Towns. This is just to commit and authorise the addition of new schemes to the capital programme. The Transforming Towns replaces the programme that you would have known previously as TRIP, the Targeted Regeneration Investment Programme. We will be the lead authority for West Wales on this, but it will enable us to include grant support for things like residential units in town centres, commercial property improvement grants, green infrastructure, public realms, strategic acquisitions, town centre markets, town centre meanwhile uses, external trading support, shop frontage, enveloping schemes, digital towns and active travel. The work done by the department and Paul.
Sorry, Councillor Francis Davis, your microphone's gone on to mute. Apologies, we can't hear you at the moment, Councillor Francis Davis. I think there seems to be a problem with your headset.
Is that better?
Yep, can hear you now, that's great.
Right, yeah. So it enables lots of applications in Swansea. I moved the 3 recommendations there. There are no financial implications for us as an authority, as the lead authority. There will be the placemaking grants will generate a 5% local management fee together with 3% regional management fee coming into us, which will cover the administration of these programs. So pleasure in moving.
Thank you, Councillor Francis Davis. I'm very happy to second that report. Colleagues, does anybody wish to come in and comment? If not, I'll ask Mr. Evans to launch the vote again, please.
Thank you, Leader. The vote has been launched. Verbal votes, Councillor Smith.
I'm for.
Any others needing to vote verbally? You're all okay. I shall close the poll. And that is.
Sorry, Hugh. Mark Child. I'm for.
Okay. Now that is unanimous for us. Waiting for the one. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, colleagues. Our final report then is the business rates temporary rate relief scheme for 22-23, and I'll go back to the Chief Finance Officer, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try to be brief. You've probably had enough of my dulcet tones for the day, but like a horror movie villain that comes back and has the last word, here I am again. Couple of bits I do need to draw your attention to. This one's got 2 recommendations. The first one is to note the scheme, and I'll draw your attention to the changes to the scheme, and then being slightly presumptive when it comes to you to move it, I'm sure you will wish to adopt the rate relief scheme. The Welsh Government is asking us to act as agent again for another relief scheme for another year. It's a continuation of temporary support to assist businesses in a range of hospitality, retail and leisure sectors. Draw attention to 2.6. It's a less generous scheme. It's less generous in England as well. It's part of the tapering arrangements that are happening as a result of COVID hopefully being seeing some of the elements of the back of and therefore still economic support but not as generous as before. Section 2.9 indicates that I estimate I need provisional funding of £10.6 million, so it's not an insignificant sum that we will be making available if we choose to act as agent. Draw attention to 3.1. The Swansea way in recent years has been to auto-pay and get flying out the blocks to get this money as fast as possible to businesses. Regrettably, to some extent for this year, for 3.2, the Welsh Government has an obligation, requires us to make all eligible ratepayers apply. That's a policy decision of theirs. It's not one I'm critical of. Mine is merely to act as agent. Again, the Swansea way is to be poised ready to start inviting people to apply at the very moment this scheme is adopted. This is a report that doesn't go on to council, so if Cabinet is so minded to agree it, we intend to be straight out the blocks and try to get as many people to apply as possible and apply the relief at source as we've done in previous years. Section 4.2 indicates that over 2,000 businesses will benefit. Section 5.1 indicates my assumption of £10.6 million. Section 5.2, as has been the same for the last 2 years, indicates I'm doing it at slight risk. It's an estimate. I take the risk of the difference. Frankly, for £10.6 million worth of business benefit to the local community and the amount that you've been making decisions on to support local residents and communities, it is a risk that I am more than happy to advise you to take as your Section 151 officer. So I therefore draw your attention back to the two recommendations. Note the scheme. It is tighter, but it's still very substantial sums, which I'm sure will be gratefully received by the business community. And therefore, I would urge you, when it comes to you now, Leader, to move the recommendation subject to any other comments you may wish to make on the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith, for that run through. Yes, I absolutely support the provisions in this report, and I'm sure, as you said, they'll be hugely welcomed by the business community in terms of ongoing support as they recover from the pandemic. So very happy to formally move that. Could I ask for a seconder, please?
Happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Francis Davis. If there aren't any questions to Mr. Smith or myself, if we could go to the vote, Mr. Evans.
Thank you, Leader. The vote has been launched. Councillor Smith, you wish to vote verbally?
Yes, please. For.
Or any others needing to vote verbally?
Yes, Hugh, Councillor Child, 4.
Thank you. Any others? Everyone's managed to vote okay. I shall close the poll. And that is unanimous for Leader.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, colleagues. That was our last item. Mr. Evans, if I could ask you to pause or stop the recording, if that could be, and if I could ask members to stay on for just a second.
Right.